Hello everybody, welcome back to From Rhythm to Algorithm. We continue on with our derivation. So, stability produces resolution, charge stabilized into mass, or charge is mass, energy stabilized into mass. And so charge and mass it's one and the same thing, right? A stabilized dynamic of charge is mass. And so orientation stabilizes, right? That's literally a magnet. Right? If you take a magnet and you can't chop it in half, right, that polarity, that orientation of its charge is stabilized. Resolution stabilizes, right? That's the focus on your camera. If you go out and do a YouTube video or TikTok and you have a gimbal, right? I think that's the word for the little gadgets where it stabilizes your camera or your device. And so sensorality focuses. Sensorality is boundarity. Boundary, we add arity. So there's another thing that I do intuitively. It seems rather trivial, but just ality to arity. Just this different, that element, that slot of A-L-I-T-Y. Sometimes it's an R, sometimes it's a V, but just some sort of generalization. Boundary, it. Sensorality dares. Dare are. What is are to is? It's what you use for singular versus plural. Yes, agreed, but why? All right, we have all of these, most of these theorems for the singular. This is that. This one thing is that thing. And so something to do, which is again fundamental existence, right, is built on is, not are. And so nothing really to say there, posing the question to generate your intuition. What is the opposite of inverse, right? And so now we had this, we kind of walked you through, that's pretty nuanced on the universal progressions, inverse versus opposition, because that's a physical evolution that you have to use words that, again, we're in this environment where everything's bounded. And so I walked you through that progression as best as possible. But now just kind of in this bounded arena, right? What is an opposite versus an inverse? And so we talked about that in an inversion, when you do 1 over a fraction or you do flip a fraction the other way. It's kind of like a self-contained system relation, and an opposition is two independent things being compared. And so the opposite of an inverse would just kind of like be the same thing, right? It's just, one times something, the identity matrix, right? Identity to inversion, right? If you invert identity, whether you're just talking about a fraction or if you invert yourself, right, you're still yourself, it doesn't really make any sense. Just asking the question to, again, logically exhaust the use of the words that we've introduced for this proof. And so sensorality is inversionality. Inversion, intention. What is intention to tension? Highlighting the difference between the T and the S. Because again, we're building, right, syllability is just the sequence of syllables. And so that order can produce a question or it can produce an answer, right? It is what it is it? And so we're just kind of like reducing this form to show that fundamental iteration of these syllables. And we're intention spelled with a T, tension spelled with an S. And then tension, dimension. Again, that's the biggest word that's just, at this point, again, we've gone through the words that don't really make any sense throughout the derivation. But when people say dimension, that means nothing to me as like physically. Notebook, right, I have a direction. I can go along a tension path. I can go forward, backward, up, down, left, right. Intention, desires. Sensorality, sires. Sire, seer. Sensorality, sues. What is liability to suit? Right, this word lawsuit. We all know what it means practically, like Brad is pressing lawsuits against everyone committing crime, and he is. Both criminally, civilly, dollars, not dollars, every bit of charge we can possibly do. We're back to charge again, but not fundamental physics anymore. But what is liability to suit? Right, liability is lawsuitability, right? Kind of a big compound amalgamated word thing there, but conceptually it makes sense, right? If you have liabilities for something, you have the ability to be sued over that thing. And so that's another big kind of connector thing for legal ontology. Sensorality is suitability, right? If you, that suits you. right, is a phrasing of that concept being identified in public sentiment right now today. And so that's an interesting, that would be another green letter section for law ontology. But liability is lawsuitability. Liable, suitable. Resolution resonates. Sensuality sonates. Just taking off the E, trying to find this connection. Sensorially is sensory. And very clearly, sensuality, right, we have this, things start as concepts and you drive down. Then we have this emergence, you put ing on something, Google-ing. Still, that could be a little tighter somewhere, I'm missing something small. But we have, again, sensuality, sensory, the 5 syllables to the 3 syllables, removing the ality. We have to just show that direct reduction in the stabilizing syllabilities within that 4 elementality-ish. Conjecture lightly. We'll get there when we get there. But clearly sensory is sensuality without the ality. So we're just finding that completion of the word family. Sensuality completing ends. So now again we have ends, and we just take the S and just move it to the front. Sensuality ends, send. Velocity is the inverse of viscosity. So that's another big mathematical physics. I don't think I would call that a fundamental. I might, yeah. I would call that the fundamental theorem of physics now. And again, it just, all of this stuff resolves with the final syllability. It just does. But think about it, right? What is velocity? Right? Still, this differentiation we've made between velocity and speed allegedly has something to do with velocity as a vector, a direction, right? Meters per second north versus meters per second. But in reality, you can only move in one direction, forward, backward, along this tension path. The independent or the unique difference between 2 points is a line, tension points, like where objects contact one another. They can't actually touch because of the charge. We have a complete model. Rhythm degenerates into vibration. Vibration's the limit. Velocity is related to rhythm. Rhythm regulates velocity. Right? Mass times velocity is momentum. So every time we say momentum, we're encapsulating velocity. But, right, viscosity is the resistance to flow. Right? A very viscous material. It's like molasses in January. You pour syrup in cold temperature, and it's really, really slow. It's viscous. And so velocity is the inverse of that. It's, again, if you say velocity, again, it's another one of these things where if you say acceleration, mathematically, physically, fundamentally, right now in equation land, it's defined as both positive and negative, right? Acceleration is a change in velocity or direction. But in reality, intuitively, conceptually, it's the same thing like assault versus battery. It's like when you say acceleration, you think like increasing speed faster, not slowing down. When you say velocity, that has a lot of velocity to it. I mean, you use it kind of exclusively in this context of getting faster, not slowing down. But it's defined, and correctly defined as velocity. Again, we're just applying physical limits. And so velocity is the inverse of viscosity conceptually, physically, and then linguistically, it's a lot closer to see that. But the resistance to flow, where flow is movement and velocity is movement. Velocity is flow. So that's another fun one. We just have is, it is, what. And so then, again, we can kind of break down. All right, velocity and viscosity relate is and it. And so, right, it is what it is our generalizing, resolving form of all solutions. Everyone knows that. You hear it all the time. You say it all the time. But it is what it is, right? The only words are using it is and what. And what is the only word not repeated, and it's the only word with a W. And we're kind of back at this question, right? Where, what, when, why is how, the only question with an H. So we're finding this fundamental differentiation, and we're connecting that with the syllability independent of context. The context being physical everything. But that's another huge one. Velocity is the inverse of viscosity. Energy, the inverse of entropy. Velocity, the inverse of viscosity. And we can now just state the fundamental theorem of biology. life is being, right? You say human being, right? Adjective, thing that we can't differentiate, be-ing, right? Do be like that. It is being. But in a trivial statement, but it's true. Why is time associated with passing, right? The time passed. Where does that really come from? What's the physical motivation? All right, well, because we have conservation of matter, or conservation of charge and mass, right? Things can just change form. So it's not really coming from physicality, right? We have evolution, meaning if I drop my notebook, it's going to fall down. It's going to, a 10 system is going to seek equilibrium, where it's most stable. And so, the rate of change for like non-sentient things. But then really the big basis, because all language is articulated from beings, is metabolism. And so what is metabolism to passing, right? If you're not metabolizing, you've passed, like you're dead. But just, again, posing these questions, trying to draw some insight. All of this logic is contained within the words. And so that's why, again, on a personal level throughout my life, it's always like, you just state a theorem and people get it's like a philosophy conversation, and it's just not. Language is literal. You can't like break that. And you just elicit people's fundamental intuitions, and then just like they get all weird, man. Association defines, right? We have words are irreducible. Notebook, book, right? Compound word from note, composition, book. So we have this idea of a book, and you can't break down book anymore. It's just this thing that has a certain function that we associate it with, right? It's not the form, it's the function. And so there's big progression throughout history and philosophy. But association defines it. You just can't break those associations. And so that's why you have all of these, like, when you're doing a branding deal, or not a deal, but you're creating a brand and a slogan, like you like smush two words together very naturally when you're creating slogans. It's like you can't break these fundamental associations. So you just take the base syllability from one word and smush it together with the base syllability of another word, and you get the conceptualization just kind of jammed together. And so that's every branding slogan that's ever existed. Sensorality associates. Sensorality socializes. Association axiomatizes. So I still, again, linguistically, when I pronounce that word, I put axiom, that's definitely that, and then matizes, that A. It's kind of like, I feel like I have to put it in there, axiomatic, right? Axiomaticality, axiomatizes. That, the I's form of it just always kind of throws me. I don't know why, but feels like I should mention that. But regardless, sensorality is axiomality. Stabilizing axiomatizes. So that's like the big connection of physical things being ising and representing those things with anything, right? We're using language. I have to use language. We're a vocal species. Language encapsulating any ordered, any intentionally ordered thing, right? If I were to tap my pen, right, we would start naturally saying, what's agreement, what's disagreement, what's confirmation, what's negation. And so you would see these repetitive things of two. All of these properties would start emerging. And so we're already using language, clearly. Well, I can't break it. Sean Carroll's a criminal. But the stabilizing, again, the physical things that we've called charge, being, mass, is physical stability. And so axioms are existent because of physical systems stabilizing literally. And so that's the big connection logically to physics, is that association axiomatizes, or stabilizing axiomatizes. And so stability to association, one and the same. Sensorality is axiomaticality. Axiomatic, automatic. And I also had, just in the margins, axiomatic, or axiomatize, maximize. It's kind of like the linguistic relation. That's what I'm doing with these dichotomistic pairs, is context linguistically. Just another word that uses this chunk of syllability. How is it pronounced? It gives you a reference. Because all of language, or is any system within a boundary, right? This completion, fundamental stability of two, positive, negative. That's everywhere. You have That's where you get natural opposition. But I forgot I was going to generalize one of the things. I just lost it, so it doesn't matter. Automatic, axiomatic. Axiomatic is algorithmic. And so now we've related this word forms where axio and algo are like our prefixes. And so prefixing is like not solidified word. It's not part of the base. It's not part of that part that isn't the irreducible association part. So now there's so much, like I honestly, the logical difference is so poignant to me right here, and it's probably not for you. I would have like called this stuff like the fundamental theorem of physics to linguistics kind of, I don't know how I'd label it, like 4 or 5 times. But words have meaning, and there's no point for me to try to explain past what the words say. They speak for themselves. But there was big logical difference in here. And so as should be apparent at this point in my derivation, it's just these, you guys don't see the logical differentiation. But when I'm sitting here talking, you can see that it's not just a bunch of theorems just popping up on your screen, but all of this, like, am I talking erratically? Or am I just sitting down day after day and just thinking through the same shit? And so when you see all my theorems on the first time, deriving speciality, you're probably thinking like it's just like ripping off theorems somehow. And it's just like, the theorems, all of this presentation is redundant on a personal level. It's just, it's developing property, and it's profoundly trivial. Once you reach physical synchronicity with the world, your internal dialogue, and you're a charged, stabilized mass being with other mass things around you, right? Thing is not being. That's the fundamental difference we just made. And you speak in this process all of the time. You can't break it. Like, it's unbreakable. So that's awesome. My life sucks. But axiomatic is algorithmic. I mean, take off that axio and the algo. Rhythmicality is maticality. And so again, we just have to logically exhaust literally all, because what we're doing is like the conceptual basis. Right? You can differentiate endlessly. You can proliferate endlessly. You can have 2 primary colors, 3 primary colors, then 64, then 128, then blah, blah, blah. But this is, again, historically relevant. When I told people, literally in like 7th grade, it's like we had to, like, they used the word derive. And it was like we have to, I don't know if they said derive or if I just internally said derive, but it was some school project where you have to get like a base. Like the base is what is set. And so we have this big logical sensorality, and we're connecting all of these things, but the fundamentals, like the ringing in your ears, is the same everywhere, right? The closer you get to physical basis, logical basis, mathematical basis, it's all the same theorems. And so I really remember, it's like, we are all going to derive the same thing. And this is in like 7th grade. And so we are at the point where, again, axiomatic is algorithmic to rhythmicality is maticality. Again, just taking off the matic from axio in the rhythmic, but spelled like algorithmic, and then putting ality. So we're very, very close to the fundamental reduction of the conceptual basis, which is like the big thing. But you guys are too stupid to see that, so I thought I'd point that out for you. Go to Harvard. Yeah, I'm sure they're going to pick up this proof anytime. Terence Tao just launched the SARE mathematical research thing, and I'm sure, Terence, he's real smart. He's a big smart math guy. He's gonna start doing this derivation anytime now. Like I said, there's no end to this. There's absolutely provably no end to this. We'll be dying. But sensorality regeneralizes. That's directly going from the rhythmicality is maticality to sensorality regeneralizes, re-hyphenated to generalize. What is generality? Again, physically, it's like undifferentiation. Right? It's just vibration. And then you differentiate that vibration. And then that movement is regulated by rhythm. And so generality is effectively, like physically, it's just vibration. Logically, it is what it is the resolution. And so, again, obviously, people bump into that all of the time. And so, but generality, geometry. And so, it's another one of those words where it's, again, geometry, they think like a 2-dimensional, and then they have the word topology, but geometry encapsulates what's identified mathematically as topology. Shape is what geometry is. And so we have all of this reduction throughout history and mathematics of, geometry being, again, like Cartesian representations of three-dimensional objects. And it's like, again, words have meaning, and geography is three-dimensional inherently. Again, I don't even like saying that anymore. Like, it sounds so intuitively, it's fine. And it's not like I'm over here saying you do have to rewrite all the textbooks, that's for sure. But you just like add to them. Again, we're providing the backing proofing for all of the things where it's just like, this is true, we think might be true, why? And it's like, we have nothing. It's like, well, here's why. Words have meaning, and there's structure to that. And because of, you have to use language, again, the generalized, any sort of pattern order to communicate. And since we've generalized that and shown a proof through that axiomatically, that demonstrates the entire structure of what mathematics could be. Nice. I'll dap myself up for that. But anyway, sensorality is geometricality. So we have geometry and metric, right? Metrics represent geometry. That's when you have a matrice, like you're just trying to have this mathematical representation of physics. But luckily for you, I derived the mathematics from the physics, because physics is what it is, physics. Words are irreducible. And so limitation is limited, meaning, again, that finite basis of everything. When you're going out and trying to gather a bunch of information, you're deriving, and then you're trying to stabilize all of that information. That's proof. And once you stabilize everything, you just iterate the same proof again, which would be a lot more fun if I got paid the dollar bill and it did not destroy my entire existence, which it definitely did. So that's not fun. But we've proven the physics exists. We've already proven that. But again, we're at the point where it's like there's nothing left. And these are massive results, obviously. And so limitation is limited, basis is finite, sensorality is finitality. And we've logically derived that, again, literally saying, and finite, the extension of these words forms is trivial. And so you just have to work up to them to have poignancy, right? You can take anything that ends in a ty, and those are all of the words that have been contracted where you put ality in between. Anything that ends like an L, you put ality, it's very clear. So on and so forth. Sensorality is finitality. Physics without ick is phys. Sensorality, ick is. Sensorality is, ick is ality. Didn't provide any explanation because there's nothing else to say. Like literally, actually, physically. We drive physics completely. Phys is effervescent. Sensorality is effervescentality. Sensorality is vescentality. Sensorality is centality, trivially. But again, we're just showing this connection, and because of this completeness, this existence of natural opposition that is emergent from the physical stability of this polar thing orbiting to physical stability, we have the ability to complete things logically. And that's contained within the letters, and we just need the letters that represent the words in the right order. And then we reduce sensorality, because sensorality is not a word. It's like a word form. It's a specific solution. And so we just have to show that iteration into the sky is blue or something. A direct iteration of the letters to a theorem that's so painfully simple that it's just like, yeah. And that's, again, like I said, there's not like a big war to end all war. There's not a theorem to end all theorems. It's just a step like any other ones of these steps. But it's undeniable and it's hilarious. And we're almost there. Come on, science, pop out. But regardless, my rights continue to be violated. It is profound and extensive stress. It doesn't matter how much fun this is for you guys to steal all of my property and act like I don't exist. It is very literally torture for me. So that is what I have for you today. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one.